Welcome back, dear students, to another lecture on postmodernism. And in our last two lectures, we tried to describe what a parody is and what a pastiche is. In this video, we shall try to understand another concept called simulacrum. Simulacrum is the singular and the plural of simulacrum is simulacra. So simulacrum is a concept that is discussed very much in postmodernism. Now the meaning of the word, the meaning of the term simulacrum or the plural word simulacra is an image or a representation of someone or something. So an image or a representation of someone or something. So simulacrum is a representation of something or someone that we can relate to. So representation. Now representation means description or portrayal of someone or something in a particular way. So it's a representation of something. Now it is hyperreal. Simulacra is hyperreal. Hyperreal means exaggerated in comparison to the real. Exaggerated in comparison to the real. It is generating something without the real or the original. For example, hyperreal in media is presentation of a story that does not entirely reflect the actual story. It is a picture of reality that does not correspond to actually what is real. So simulacrum is not imitation. It is not duplication. It is not parody. It is substituting the signs of the real for the real. The examples given by Jean Baudrillard are psychosomatic illness, Disneyland, Watergate, etc. Now these are images or representation of something that does not have the reality. There is no real but only the image or the representation. There is no real but only the image or the representation. Let's talk something about the history of simulacra. The word simulacrum or simulacra was first recorded in English language in the 16th century. Now it was defined to describe a representation such as a statue or a painting, especially that of a god. Now when we come to the 19th century, it had acquired a secondary association of inferiority, an image without the substance, an image without the qualities of the original. The philosopher Frederick Jameson offers photorealism as an example of artistic simulacrum. Now photorealism, where a painting is sometimes created by copying a photograph that itself is a copy of the real. So copying a photograph, and photograph is the copy of the real. The French philosopher Jean Baudrillard has conceptualized postmodern surface culture as simulacrum. Simulacrum is a virtual reality. Simulacrum is a virtual reality or a fake reality simulated or induced by the media or other ideological apparatus. It is simulated. Simulacrum is not mere imitation or duplication. It is the substitution of the original by the simulated. It is the substitution of the original by the fake image. In postmodern world, there are no originals, only copies, no reality, only simulations. The postmodern world has lost its capacity to discriminate between the real and the artificial. The postmodernist French social theorist Jean Baudrillard argues that simulacrum is not a copy of the real but becomes truth in its own right, the hyperreal. Baudrillard, in his work Simulacra and Simulation, he breaks the sign order into 4 different stages. The sign order is broken down into 4 different stages. The first stage is the faithful image, faithful copy. Here the sign is a profound reflection of the reality. The image is the basic reflection of the reality. That is the first stage. When we come to the second stage of the sign order, the second stage is perversion of reality. Perversion. Here we have the unfaithful copy. First one, faithful copy. Here we have the unfaithful copy which masks and denatures reality. The signs and images do not faithfully reveal reality to us, but can hint at the existence of an obscure reality which the sign itself is incapable of encapsulating. And the above two can be maybe thought of in comparison with the two types of image making put forward by the philosopher Plato. He would talk about the faithful reproduction, that is trying to copy precisely the original, and the second one is intentionally distorted image to make the copy appear as the correct one to the viewers. The third stage of sign order, the third stage masks the absence of profound reality, masks the absence. The sign pretends to be a faithful copy, but it is a copy with no original. It is pretense of reality. So the third stage is pretense of reality. And the last one, the fourth stage of sign order, is the stage of pure simulacrum. The stage of pure simulacrum. The simulacrum has no relationship to any reality whatsoever. The signs merely reflect other signs, and any claim to reality on the part of the image or signs is of the order of other such claims. So there is no reality. So simulacra bears no relation to any reality. The representation has no relation to any reality. The postmodern world is the world of the simulacrum. There is no reality, only some images of the reality that does not exist. So this is something about simulacra. Now, some recreational simulacra include the reenactment of some historical events or replicas of some landmarks which does not exist, or construction of a fictional or cultural ideas like the Disneyland. It's a cultural construction. The danger is that the boundary between the artificiality and the reality will become so thin that the artificial will become the center of moral value. So only that exists is the artificial. The only that thing that exists is the image. There is no reality, only representation. An interesting example of simulacra is the caricature. When an artist produces in a line drawing that closely approximates the facial features of a real person, the subject of the sketch cannot be easily identified by a random observer. It can be taken for a likeness of any individual, the line drawing. However, the caricaturist exaggerates some prominent facial features, and the viewer will pick up on these features and will be able to identify the subject, even though the caricature bears far less actual resemblance to the subject. So this can be considered as an example of simulacrum, the caricature. Now let's talk something more about Jean Baudrillard. According to Baudrillard, the postmodern society has become so reliant on models, so reliant on maps, and we have lost all contact with the real world. The real world that preceded the map. Usually the map is produced from the real world. The reality has begun to imitate the model. According to him, we have lost all ability to make sense of the distinction between nature and artifice. He argues that there are three orders of simulacra. According to Baudrillard, there are three orders of simulacra. The first order of simulacra, he associates it with the pre-modern period, the first order of simulacra, the pre-modern period. Now, here in this order, the image is the clear counterfeit. The image is the imitation of the real. The image is an illusion, a place marker of the real. The representation imitates the real. That is the first order of simulacra, pre-modern. The second order simulacra, he associates it with the industrial revolution of the 19th century. Now in this period, in the second order, the distinction between the image and the representation begin to break down because of the mass production and the proliferation of copies. A lot of copies are made. Only the copies are available, originals are not there. Such production will mask and will misrepresent an underlying reality by imitating it so well, thus threatening to replace the reality. Now there is a belief that one can still access the hidden fact of the real. Now the representation masks and misrepresents the real. That is the second order. The representation masks and misrepresents the real. The third order of simulacra, he associates it with the postmodern age. The representation precedes and determines the real. The representation will precede and determine the real. There is no distinction between the reality and its representation. There is only simulacrum. In the third order simulacra, the representation is preceding the real. Usually the representation used to follow the real. So in the postmodern times, in the third order simulacra, before the real there is the representation. The real is made out of the representation. The representation will precede and determine the real. There are a number of phenomena that Baudrillard points out to explain the laws of distinction between the reality and the simulacrum. Laws of distinction between the reality and the simulacrum that is characteristic of the postmodern times. The first one is the media culture. The contemporary media is not concerned with relaying the correct information, but they interpret our most private selves for us, making us approach each other and the world through the lens of these images. Therefore, we acquire goods not out of our real need, but because of desires that are created by the commercials. They are created. This keeps us removed from the reality of our bodies and the world around us. So we choose things not because we want it, because the need is created, artificially created. The second thing we can remember is the exchange value. Everything is translated into how much it is worth, into what it can be exchanged for. So its exchange value is more important. Money has become the universal equivalent against which everything is measured. Things have lost their material reality. We even think of our lives in terms of money, not the real things we hold in our hands. We have lost all sense of use value, and it is all capital. That is the second example we can remember. And there is something called multinational capitalism. The things that we use are products of multinational capitalism. Not even national identity functions. We lose touch with the underlying reality of the goods we consume. It is capital that defines our identity. Capital. We lose touch with the material fact of our laborer, The laborer is invisible to the consumer, and most consumers do not know how the products they consume are related to the real life things. So only capital. We value things only the use value, capital. In urbanization as well, we have lost the distinction between the reality and the artificial. We continue to develop the available geographical area, the real area. We lose touch with any sense of the natural world. Even natural spaces are defined in contradistinction to an urban society, urban reality. Contradistinction means distinction made by contrasting the different qualities of two things. So we are not able to distinguish between reality and artificiality. Let's take the example of language and ideology. Now, language keeps us from accessing reality in postmodern times. The earlier understanding of ideology was that ideology hid the truth and represented the false consciousness. That was the earlier understanding. The ideology kept us away from seeing the real working of the state, or real working of the economic forces, or of the dominant groups of power. But postmodernism understands ideology as a support for our very perception of reality. There is nothing outside of ideology. Nothing outside of ideology. At least no outside that can be articulated in language. Nothing outside ideology. We rely on language to structure our perceptions. Any representation of reality is always already ideological, always already constructed by simulacra. So we are not able to identify between what is real and what is artificial. In this connection, we need to know this particular term hyperreal, that is very much used in postmodernism. Now, hyperreal is an inability of consciousness to distinguish reality from a simulation of reality, especially in technologically advanced postmodern societies. Hyperreality is seen as a condition in which what is real and what is fiction are seamlessly blended together, so that there is no clear distinction between where one ends and the other begins. Simulated reality and the reality. It allows the commingling of physical reality with the virtual reality, the human intelligence with the artificial intelligence. Individuals may find themselves for different reasons more in tune or involved with the hyperreal world and less with the physical world. So simulacra is a state in which we are not able to distinguish between what is real and what is artificial. And postmodern society, there is only simulated or artificial reality. We are not able to distinguish between what is real and what is not real. My dear students, this is another concept that is very often talked about in postmodern English literature. Jean Baudrillard is a proponent of this particular concept. In his book Simulacra and Simulation, he tries to describe what is simulacra. The postmodern society is governed by simulacra. The representation or the image will precede the reality, and we are not able to distinguish between what is real and what is a simulated reality. Both are blended together, the artificial and the real. I hope this little discussion on simulacra was useful to you. I hope to meet you again with another concept in postmodernism without much delay. Have a joyful learning. Please stay safe. Have a nice time.